Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Leadnap Gaming. Today we continue our fleet management series looking at building the ideal mining fleet.
Systems activated. Systems on.
Welcome back everyone. Mining. This sort of fleet differs from, say, the cargo fleet, where you have a few options and choices to make. Mining, on the other hand, is rather specialized. There are only a few ships in the game that can perform this function. So today is more about structuring that fleet and choosing your path. Mining is a great income generator because there's little risk financially and pretty amazing margins available to the discerning miner. Mining, however, is very much like every other profession in Star Citizen. If you don't know what you're doing and just go out to mine some rocks, you're going to make little for your efforts. Mining also comes in a few flavors, which is the real meat and potatoes of today's video. How big do you want to get? The first tier is solo mining. This is where every miner starts out. Aside from the overhead of having a mining vehicle, your overhead's nil. You can literally begin this process with a simple hand mining utility tool. With the right dedication and efforts, you'll make a decent wage going this way. It's honest work and leaves you open to playing a lot of other game loops. That doesn't mean you should just roll out there with whatever. Unlike later tiers, there is still a bit of option here though. As a hand miner, you're going to have to wait for full persistence and server stability for this to be truly profitable. CIG just released the Grey Cat Rock mining vehicle, and while on the face of things this is a great option to start out, the rock will not appear on any of these fleet provisions. The cargo box is just too small. The rock would be nice for getting around on the surface and maximizing mining time, but you must have cargo area large enough for it on the ship you take it to the planet in, and that space would be better utilized if you just stored boxes from hand mining there instead. The rock also pushes up the size of ship you take out and potentially limits some of the great options for all-around ships like the Mercury Star Runner. So hand miners of the verse, a few quality options. The 315 brings with it a more powerful scanning suite, and with subcomponents in the future will mean you could potentially configure this to have even more dedicated scanning for those rocks. It's small, it's cheap, very easy to get in and out of with great visibility and range. The cargo grid drops down, so you don't even have to enter the ship to store mining boxes when you hand mine. You'll fly between rock formations far faster than the rock can drive them, and scanning from higher altitudes is so much easier. Unlike the other 300 series, with this you get more cargo space, and like them, you'll have the guns to contest your claim from other interested parties or Grey Cat rocks. The Cutlass Red, bigger and pricier. This is an honorable mention because of the spawning bed and the first pick for anyone who cave mines. Park at the mouth of the cave, set ICU, and head in. If you fall or are killed in an explosion, you're just going to find yourself back at the mouth of the cave. Still has plenty of room for boxes to be stored on a legit cargo grid for easy sale. Even larger, and certainly theoretical today, is the Corsair. Literally a planetary explorer. This is the sort of ship you're going to want if you want to head deep into the verse for the best untapped veins. Plenty of cargo, and you could even take out that .8 SCU mining box on wheels. Some other honorable mentions: the Aquila, Hercs, Freelancers, Reliance, though all of these trade off more than the first two options. Of course, the solo miner really looking for income and willing to spend a little could just pick up a prospector. This is perhaps the best value because you can get in and out to hand mine or take the bigger rocks you'd need a buggy to pull off otherwise. I don't need to explain why the only solo mining ship in the game is a good choice for solo miners to own. With this fleet, if you're serious, the 315 Corsair and Prospector would be decent cash buys, but the best part of solo mining operations is you can rent or buy with UEC, and no need for LTI on any of these either, at least as far as mining goes. The next tier we're going to call the contractor tier, and it's here that we get a little more theoretical. To go beyond this point, we have to address the total spectrum of mining operations. Now you might think, sure, I just go find some rocks and break them. But a true mining entrepreneur understands that's just one piece of the puzzle. The first step is locating a site. Now, sure, you could just buy that information, but that cuts into those profits. After all, if someone is selling the location, who else did they sell it to already? The next step is, of course, heading to the site and harvesting the materials there. There's a variance here, and we'll get into that later. But from there, however, you have a new problem. The rocks still need to be refined. Otherwise, you're just hauling tailings. Once refined, that material needs to make it to market, Of course, there's also room to be the market. So that first step, well, again, depending on the size of your operation, you could just opt to buy the data, but that's really only viable if you're big. And I'm sure you probably thought it went the other way, but think about it. Other people are going to make a living exploring and finding that stuff, so it's not going to be cheap, especially the really big veins that you want. Second, someone running a massive operation doesn't have time themselves to go explore it out. The price to find it yourself is actually rather low. A 315 is a solid choice. Same here are the Corsair, Aquila, and if you have a Carrack, that too. Though the latter two are jump point scanning ships. Another solid option, especially in more dangerous space, the Terrapin. Exploitation is the potatoes in our stew, for which there are a few varieties. There is selective mining, in which you head out to find specific resources, say titanium or agricium, and you work only to harvest the best veins. There's also strip mining, in which you start at a point A and work towards point B. If it can be mined, it's mined. There's planetary and non-planetary versions of this, and each requires a different approach. There's a secondary step involved in this process as well, however, transportation. Now, this is not currently realized in Star Citizen yet, but the currently available ships for mining all have relatively low capacities for mined cargo. So ideally, these ships would drop their cargo on the ground and a different ship would simultaneously pick them up for transportation through the next few steps. After all, if the prospectors and moles of the verse have to constantly fill and head back to unload, that puts a massive damper on your operational profits. This consideration, however, is certainly one dependent on the size of your operation. Refining is the meat of our stew, yet not required, assuming you don't like money. The cost variation between refined goods and non-refined goods will be dramatic. If a smaller operation has the ability to refine, they'll see dramatically improved profit margins. CIG has not yet released a refining ship yet, meaning this stage remains bound to specific stations. However, our fleet plans will have a placeholder for this necessary ship. Lastly, market transport, because if you do everything else but don't bring it to market, you don't get paid. Now for the dirty truth. There's not a single mining fleet in reality. Your fleet composition will have to change repeatedly as you progress and how you progress. If you pay attention to heavy industry fleets in real life, you'll notice they buy and sell vehicles like used car salesmen. The other dirty truth is, none of these fleets will be ideally owned by a single player. From here, this is more of an org discussion, though a single player could attempt to own all of this and just hire players and NPCs alike. If NPCs can be used to crew fully a ship, these do, however, become single-player fleets. Now that we've identified the different stages of the operation, I'm going to cover various fleet configurations you might go through, generally in an order you might go through. But in reality, it's not linear, so take their presentation with a grain of salt. Ideally, this will help feed your understanding of how to structure these fleets and why. Up first, the small outfit fleet. Ideal for ventures who are departing the single-man mining operation. This fleet's built around a single player with NPC crew or a group of 2 to 3 players. To locate, the 315 is still the best choice, and you probably still have it from your solo days. For exploitation, the Argo Mole is optimal here. Enough crew and cargo space to make it work with relative speed. For transportation at this stage, you're not going to refine. Eventually, you would want to make that addition though. The Mole has enough to allow you to stay out there a long time, meaning you could just be truly selective and go after only the most valuable deposits. This route would let you fly the Mole back to deposit the goods at the market. Alternatively, with full persistence in place, you could locate a nice, preferably hidden spot to use as a collection site, dropping bags and heading back out. At this stage, a Herc, C2, M2, or Caterpillar would be a solid choice to take those bags back to market. It is an important consideration here that when the bags are dropped, they'll have to make their way onto the cargo ship, and of the ships I just mentioned, only the Caterpillar has a tractor beam, and that's why it has a tractor beam, so consider that the Cat will probably be your best choice here. The medium outfit expands on the smaller outfit. Using a handful of players, this is ideal for a small org or a dedicated division of a larger one. This plan also relies heavily on NPC crews. To locate, the 315 is still the solid choice. However, as previously mentioned, the Terrapin and Corsair are interchangeable. On exploitation, the Mole is still king, but this fleet should look to have 2 or 3 of these, as well as a prospector or 2. At the smallest level, 1 of each, then progress to 2 moles, then 2 prospectors, and now add moles. Now that might seem strange, but the rationale here is simple. Moles should ignore deposits that a prospector can mine. The added benefit of the mole is the addition of specialized lasers that can be used in one of two ways. Either specialized to each phase or type of rock in the mining operation where one turret heats, one breaks, and one breaks down. Alternatively, where all three turrets are used simultaneously on a single harder target. Next up is mid-transport, and this is where we see simultaneous mid-transport during operation. The Argo SRV will be the best choice here. When the miners fill up, they'll simply drop in place, and the SRV will traverse the field, picking bags up and bringing them to the refinery. Alternatively, for those operations with smaller budgets, the Cutlass Black and 315 are options with tractor beams as well, and are equally suited to the task. The 315 is much smaller, making it beneficial for certain transport considerations like bringing it to the site in a C2 that's used for final transport. The Cuddy has the benefit of also being able to provide some weapon support for the more dangerous sites. On the refining side, you'll need a refinery ship when it comes out. It's imperative at this scale that refining takes place at the site, because to pay everyone involved, you'll need maximum profit, and not to haul any tailings to the marketplace. The refinery ship may carry with it mid-transport capability, which would be really nice. CIG, hope you're listening. Market transport. As mentioned a little earlier, the C2 provides solid utility in this market. There is room, however, to also utilize a hull B and eventually hull C, because the tractor beam mid-transports can take refined cargo up from the surface. The large outfit works only with some features being implemented by CIG. To locate, the Corsair and Carrack are the only feasible options here. This sort of operation is looking in the deepest parts of space for the biggest sites to exploit. Conversely, at this stage, buying the data from explorers is viable and actually now cost-saving. For exploitation like the previous tier, the mole reigns supreme, though it would be interesting to see if at any point a medium miner gets refining capability as well. If so, that would become ideal. You can lose the prospectors here, only because they may lack the legs to reach deep enough. Fuel. This is the first real shift from the medium operation, and it reflects the larger change in approach rather than fleet composition. The large operation should be looking into deep space to operate. Those SRVs and moles are going to be burning hydrogen fuel with little ability to roll back to the gas station to get more. You're looking at being on site for a period of days to weeks. A starfarer is going to be necessary to resupply locally and keep operating. Mid-transport, again the SRV, though at this point a ratio of about 1 SRV to 5 moles is ideal. My demonstration fleet here indicates this at its base, but understand as an operation of this size, you could scale endlessly, though it may not be practical to do so. Of course, you'll need a refinery, and based on refining capacity, perhaps more than one. And transport, assuming CIG delivers on command pod departure for the cat, a handful of cats is ideal, and here's why. A single command pod and 2 to 3 cat hulls will allow you to take a full cat back to market with the other empty ones filled in sequence at the refining site. Alternatively, a hull D or 2 hull Cs are ideal. Yes, you'll contract security for them, but the profit margin on a refined material-filled hull D will more than leave you with McDuckian margins. The D will be better than the Cs because of the smaller need for security, though the Cs would allow a rotation like the cats. As these fleets are more nebulous than I would prefer, we should take a moment to talk about where the money's actually made. It's not the mining ships, but the market. Time is the most critical factor in expense. The longer your ships are out mining, the more fuel they consume in overhead. And, of course, in wage, NPCs are likely to be paid by time unit, not by percent of profit. The longer the NPC crew works, the more they're going to cost you. Delivery is the most critical factor in income, but this is directly tied to time. The more you send to market, the more you make. As such, the more equipment you take out, the longer you must use that equipment to be profitable. Which goes without saying, but grasp that cargo hauling can be cheap, even secured. The same hull D can yield different margins. The faster the hull D is filled, the faster you get to market, but you must balance what it takes to fill it quickly. Bigger may not always be better. At the same time, a small outfit running a month-long operation that has no NPCs could have better profit margins, as players can be paid in percentage of haul, leaving only fuel cost as overhead, vastly reducing that time factor. You might think I've neglected one of the biggest ships in the game. I've not. Simply, the Orion is dedicated to a single form of mining. You cannot take it to planets, leaving the previous fleets valued. But for smaller orgs and single players looking to use NPCs, strip mining is where your best returns will be found. The Orion is the sort of ship you take into an asteroid field and clear it out. Everything goes into those teeth. Quantity over quality. To locate, if you're a single player, odds are you'll invest in your own exploration craft like a Corsair, though not always for mining use. If dedicated to mining, the 315 or Terrapin are actually more efficient. You could also just opt to buy the locations, which truthfully makes the most sense. Orion is expensive to own. Better keep it running as much as possible. For exploitation, obviously the Orion. The beauty here is this eliminates so much of the middlemen on site. The Orion harvests, it refines, it removes the mid-transport from the equation. It also serves the purpose of bringing everything to market behind capital-class shields. Orion does bring with it some issues. You may not want to use it for final transportation. The whole series will generate less attention, relatively speaking, of course. It will be expensive to get the Orion in place, so displacing it back to market is a burden. Cargo runners are cheap. You could even look to contract that out if you're just a single player. You'll also certainly need security. Eventually the verse will have plenty of planets with plenty of surface to mine. Asteroid belts to be cleared out, however, totally different matter. Unlike Eve, CIG has said materials will be set and persistent. The field around Yellow, once mined, will be gone forever. I do have doubts about this being viable for CIG, however. Even so, if sites do respawn, the Orion will still only be able to operate in less places, and they will be more contested. Pirates passing through won't fail to see your capital ship pop up on their sensors either, and probably won't resist. These fleets are too nebulous to tell you what to spend cash on, what to spend credits on, what should have LTI. Well, the Orion certainly. Cash and LTI. Unless you want to work towards that, in which case, enjoy the journey. And really, I mean that. An Orion is not pay to win. There's a lot it can't do, and better profits can be made with smaller, more versatile ships. It does, however, offer the single player the ability to move big quantities. If you've stuck with me this long, I have two bonus fleets for you. The Citizen trying to build your own private mining fleet. The first is clean and simple. The mining fleet for the non-miner. Start with a 315 to find the sites. From there, take a C2 with Greycat Rock. This assumes the rock gets the ability to download its cargo, which it should. It won't take up much space, so you can take it out all alone. The better option, however, is buying a Crucible. The repair ship? Yes, that one. You'll need to use the 315 or similar Explorer to find the sites, but from that step, take said Crucible and park a Prospector inside. This lets you go from A to B with both the cargo ship and the miner. Crucible has plenty of SCU, and that SCU isn't even pad dedicated. Where the Prospector parks is intended to be a repair area, so the Crucible will store SCU elsewhere. I'm not saying this is the most ideal, but it has the potential to be pretty effective, especially for solo players with maybe an NPC or two to run the Crucible. A lot of this depends on mechanics working a certain way, but it seems currently unlikely CIG would limit these mechanics as such. Of course, this also relies heavily on believed information about the concept that has yet to see any development. It also offers you profession diversity. With this setup, you could roam deep space for months, gathering selectively, and then return home to sell as needed, choosing not to use this ship for mining if repairs are currently profitable. There you have it. We could spend hours dissecting these further, but hopefully this gave you an idea of how to construct the ideal mining fleet. Notably, orgs will benefit most from the larger schemes, and who owns what and how you acquire it will certainly vary as such. Have any mining fleet ideas I didn't touch? Let's talk about them in the comments, and don't worry, piracy's up next. As always, don't forget to like and share this video, subscribe if you haven't, and I will catch you all next time.